Thank you. Now what we're going to talk about today is our experience, and hopefully I've been chatting to, there's a couple of girls here I've been chatting to earlier, to try and demystify it a bit, because I think it's a bit mystifying and a bit frightening when you first start. So it's our view of it and our experiences that we want to share with you. So I'm Val Henderson, and I'm actually a clinical lead for tissue viability for a large trust up in Northumberland. And it's Northumbria Healthcare NHS Trust I work for. We have 3 general hospitals. We have 6 community hospitals. We've recently vertically integrated with 2 PCTs, one of which is a social services as well as a health combined trust, which has been quite interesting. And we have a patient population of over 500,000. And we're a large geographical trust. We cover from the Scottish border right down to Sunderland, just about, and across to the Cumbrian border. And we're waiting for the Department of the Health to agree that we can become a larger trust with Cumbria Acute as well. So we'll literally go from one side of the country to the other if that happens. So it's massive. Lovely in the summer, not so much fun in the winter. So, why research? Why do we get involved with research? Well, I don't really know is the honest answer. I think I happen to be working with somebody on some other project. I've been involved with NICE in the past and various other organisations, and it just came up. And at first I was like, oh no, I'm not sure I want to do this. I remember doing my masters and had to do some research for my masters, and I thought, oh, it seems a bit complicated. But anyway, I happened to meet somebody standing to my left who really invigorated me to get on and do it. And I have to say that Louise is my motivation. And if you can get a good research nurse like I've got, it's not a problem whatsoever. So make friends with your R&D department would be my biggest advice. If you remember nothing else today, remember that. It was an opportunity. It happened to be the subject, happened to be something that I was very interested in, which was pressure ulcers, which I'd done for both my degree and my master's. And as a tissue viability nurse is a large part of my role, more so in the last 18 months, as I'm sure has come with all of us. Because it was pressure ulcers, and obviously I had done it for my degree, I did have some experience in it, and I like a challenge. I wouldn't have been a tissue viability nurse for so long, from 1996, if there weren't new challenges every so often. I think I would have moved on. So I do enjoy a challenge, and that's how I took it. So between us, Louise has been a clinical research nurse for over 5 years, and I've been a principal investigator for almost 5 years. We've done both commercial and non-commercial studies. So the difference being is that normal non-commercial studies are studies that come to us via the NHS, if you like, whereas commercial studies is where we're approached by companies out there with products that they want to do research, and they've approached us to do it. And the reason we've been approached to do commercial studies is because we have built up a reputation of being able to recruit well. And that's what you want in a study. You want to recruit as many people as you can, because obviously you're going to get bigger evidence in your results. So we have been involved with a purpose study from basically just about day one, and we've been involved with 5 arms of that study, which is being quality of life issues for patients living with pressure ulcers, pain, and we're now involved in pressure 2 and have been since August. Venus 4 study we've been involved with. That was a leg ulcer study, which I believe the results have been talked about at this conference, but unfortunately I haven't been unable to go. Have you been, Louise?
I've heard, yes.
Good.
It was good.
And a commercial study we've been involved with was PICO, looking at the use of PICO on different types of acute wounds. And we have in our portfolio, we have a portfolio now, we have 2 potential commercial studies. Hopefully by the end of this year will be taken on. I can't tell you anything about them, unfortunately, because as you can appreciate, it's quite sensitive. But just to say that we have got 2 more commercial studies we're going to be involved with. One of the things I don't like about the NHS at the minute is abbreviations. I don't know how you all feel about them, but I go to meetings and people are talking abbreviations. I haven't got a clue what they're talking about. And many a time I'll come out of a meeting and I'll go and look up the abbreviation. Or I'll actually put my head above the parapet and say, sorry, I don't understand what you're talking about. Can you tell me what that is? So there's an awful lot of abbreviations, as I'm sure you found this morning, just going through the feasibility. It's one of my pet hates. So where do we fit into the research cycle? Well, currently we fit into the bit that says carry out the research. That's where we fit in at the moment. However, I am now involved in the design research study. So I'm involved as a co-applicant with the Pressure 2 study. So that's quite interesting. Being actually involved in actually designing the research has been really interesting to get involved with. This is one of the abbreviations that you'll be seeing, and this is the form that we've been discussing just prior to this meeting, for those of you in that meeting. And it's the Integrated Research Application System. And this is where you fill in all the information about the research that you're going to be undertaking and your trust's involvement with it. And this is what gets signed off by your trust. It is initially quite daunting when you see it, but like I say, make friends with your R&D department and they'll talk you through it. And certainly whoever has asked you to undertake the research, they will also be able to talk you through it as well. So don't be frightened to ask. So what do I do as a PI? Well, I'm a detective every day because I think as a tissue viability nurse, that's what we do. We look to assess patients or trying to find out why a pressure ulcer occurred. I don't know about everybody else, but when I'm asked to go and look at a patient who's got a pressure ulcer, I'm actually not that interested in the wound. I'm more interested in why it occurred in the first place and removing that issue. So I am a bit of a detective, so PI sits quite nicely. But in this context, I'm principal investigator, so that means I'm responsible for the study within the trust from a clinical point of view. I have to complete the SSI form via the IRIS. I attend meetings with the sponsor, and that's the person who's actually asking us to undertake the research. So for the Pressure 2, it's Leeds University. And I attend internal research meetings within the trust to discuss things like how many patients have we recruited for all the studies that we undertake in the trust. Because that needs to be done, but we are regularly asked to complete a form to say how many patients we've recruited. And funding for the following years is based on those number of patients actually recruited. And more recently, I've been a co-application for a research study. I'd now like to hand you over to Louise, who'll talk to you about being a research nurse.
So as Val said, I've been doing this post for about, just over 5 years now. And the first thing that I found was the language was a real problem for me. It was like an alien language. And I think it's really off-putting for clinical staff at the coalface, because it just puts them off and makes them want to run a mile usually when they hear that you're a research nurse. So if I had a magic wand, that's the one thing I would probably change about it is the language. And actually I had a discussion with a physio just last week who said, oh, I'm going to take up a new post as a research physio within the stroke unit. She said, and I went to a meeting and I came out and I was absolutely none the wiser. I had no idea at all what they were talking about. And it just made me smile because it's absolutely what everybody feels, I think, when they first start in research. We're all kind of bombarded with the abbreviations. So it's normal. And the second thing that I realised was that I'd spent the previous 20 years doing things for my patients and being needed by them and providing them the care that they wanted or that they needed. And then now suddenly I needed them. They didn't really need me anymore. I was inviting them to take part in the research. And they're under no obligation whatsoever to take part. It is an invite. So suddenly the boot was on the other foot. So why do I do it? Well, when Val told me that I was going to be doing this and speaking at a conference, I didn't know why I was doing this, really. This is definitely on my not-to-do list. But I really believe that nursing research should be done in the community. I'm a think my heart belongs in the community, really, with community nursing. And I think there's lots of unanswered questions out there and lots of opportunity and a huge untapped pool of patients that we could get involved. We could get those patients involved in future studies. It's definitely a challenge, as Val mentioned, and we all like a challenge. Because I think you end up hunting for your patients. Then they don't just come to you, you've got to go out and find them. So you're using your gatekeepers, and your gatekeepers for me are the ward staff and also the district nurse teams. So I have to go out and ask them for their help to screen for eligible potential patients. So you're definitely hunting for them. They don't come on a plate. And it satisfies my curiosity really as well. I think I've always been a bit of a why and what if and what happens if we do that kind of nurse. So it helps with that. And I wasn't quite sure how the patients would find the whole aspect of being invited to take part in research. So I wasn't quite sure how they would take to it. And actually, the ones who are involved really do seem to enjoy being involved in research. It sometimes gives them access to different treatments. I think sometimes they feel a little bit special because they've been singled out to take part in something extra. And they do end up getting extra visits. It's over and above their usual care. And we're all doing it really to improve patient care in the end. We all want to give them the best care that we can. And I quite like seeing through the whole project from the very beginning to the very end. So it's quite nice from setting up the study within our trust, to then discussing it with the different parties and then finding the patients and completing it all the way through, even down to archiving the study at the end. You got a sense of satisfaction at the end of it all. You've also got some training opportunities as well through the comprehensive local research networks. So any nurse who's actually working on portfolio studies can access this training. So I've accessed things like good clinical practice, adults lacking capacity, informed consent and ethics, and perhaps patient and public involvement as well. So we can all access those, and they're quite interesting training courses to go on. And I think repeating the formula, I'm quite interested in that. In that, I work with the team of tissue viability nurses, and I think other research nurses could do the same within other specialties. So they could work with continence nurses or the long-term oxygen therapy team or infection control, and perhaps grow research within the community and nursing research within the hospital environment as well. And I think future burning questions, really. Perhaps in the end we might end up, you never know, doing our own bit of research. Not promising. And the artwork is all Val's. She's added all the extra bits on. Very high tech. So we get our studies, as Val said, from a variety of sources. One of them is the National Institute of Health Research Clinical Research Network portfolio, and the studies have to fulfill certain criteria to be adopted onto that portfolio, so that you know you're dealing with quality studies overall. And the second way, we've had a couple of our studies, I'm thinking of PICO, and we've also had Venus 4 as well, through the primary care research networks. So you do get them from a variety of angles, but one of the main two ways, I think, is word of mouth. Certainly the tissue viability nurses, they're really good at networking. I think they're quite active, they're a little hive mind. And so word of mouth is very good within that specialty. And the track record on delivery, once you've done one study and you've delivered, you end up being offered other studies, and it's a bit of a rolling programme. So Val touched on this as well, the non-commercial studies, the types of studies that we do, non-commercial and commercial, they come to us really as complete studies. So we run with them as they're given to us, but inevitably within your own area, you'll come across problems, or it might not work as smoothly in your area maybe as it does in other areas, because we all work slightly differently. So you end up with perhaps sometimes amendments to studies going through. But the third option is the one that I'm quite interested in, and that's been involved in studies under development. So it means that we can put our two penneth in really and get involved at the planning stage, and hopefully what that will come out with at the end is a smoother study, so we can try and preempt the problems that we're going to get when we're trying to run the study. And skills and challenges. Well, the skills, communication's an obvious one. You end up having to communicate with your study teams, your R&D team, your gatekeepers, as I've said, the district nurse teams, the ward staff, your colleagues locally, and also the patients as well. Obviously, you're communicating with them. And then the relationships, you have to build relationships with everybody who you're communicating with. So it's a bit of a full-time job. And I think I've spent a lot of time, up until last September, I was working solely on community-based studies. So I'd spent a lot of time building up relationships with the different district nursing teams throughout our patch. And they are absolutely key in helping you to find your patients. So it is so important that they're on board and will help. And some are better than others at helping you out. You have to be quite self-motivating. I mean, the current study that we're working on, Pressure 2, that's going on for 3 years. And I think that one of the problems I can foresee with that is just keeping your momentum going with it, and just, well, generally just keeping on going with the study. I think the longest one we've worked on previous to that is maybe about a year or 18 months. I'm trying to remember now, probably about 18 months. So this is double the length of time, so I'm going to have to think of new strategies, perhaps moving sites. We've got a few different sites that we can take that study to, so that will be a bonus as well. And competitive. I would never have said that I was competitive before I started this post, but apparently I am. Who knew? I think it's really good to be competitive in that you set yourself targets for the number of patients that you would like to hopefully recruit within, say, a month or a week. But also you end up, if it's a multi-centre site, you're quite competitive with other areas as well, because I think we've got a really good working relationship with the tissue viability team south of Tyne, and there's certainly quite a lot of banter between us because we work on a lot of the same studies, so we're usually trying to see who's in the lead for recruiting the most patients. Makes the time go faster anyway. I think attention to detail, it helps as a research nurse if you've got a little bit of OCD about you, because you're working on good quality studies, but you want to make sure that you're collecting good quality data so that at the end of the day we can get some good evidence together to inform our practice. And data collection and your case report forms are all really important, so the study teams can make sense of what we've sent in. And project management, I do that with Val really. We do that as a joint effort. Keeping the study on track. With a lot of the studies, you're doing a rolling programme, so you're recruiting and then you're following them up, and while you've got some in follow-up, you're trying to recruit new ones. So when you're one person working on that study, the issue then becomes holidays, and how do you get your holidays, and trying to work out cover for that because the tissue viability team are stretched, and trying to get hold of a research nurse from the acute side is nearly mission impossible. So it is quite challenging, but you do have to build that into the whole study management. And future planning, I'm always thinking about the next study, so what will come next, because if I haven't got another study to work on, then I'll end up getting moved somewhere, and I would rather work within this specialty on research studies. So I'm always thinking about the next one, when this one will finish, when that one can start up. So thankfully we've had quite regular work, we'll put it that way. So. And for the specialty, I think it's quite, you end up building up an increased body of knowledge as well about that specialty, so that helps. And also an enthusiasm. My past, as I say, has been as a community staff nurse. And within that role, I was one of Val's link nurses for tissue viability. So I've always had that enthusiasm for tissue viability. So I think it really does help then with the success of the study to have that enthusiasm. So the challenges, well, you have to try and be patient, and this is a difficult one for me because I'm not usually very patient, but often studies will have delays in starting. Probably about 9 out of 10, I think, of them have delays. And it's just trying to work with the study teams and get things going as soon as possible and line up your meetings with the district nurse teams or the ward staff so that you're ready to hit the ground running really as soon as you get the green light for going with the study. And the target recruitment numbers, I can't speak now, they're quite key really. I would say it's when I first started, you could read a protocol and think, oh, we've got loads of those patients, this will be a doddle, it'll be no problem whatsoever. And then as you get on closer inspection with your inclusion and exclusion criteria, you think, actually, you've funneled them down so much that actually it is a bit more of a challenge than you thought to get your patients. So try not to overestimate what you think you're going to end up recruiting. And I found it quite useful to do with some of the more recent studies, some scoping exercises. So if I'm not sure how many patients are out there, I will pick a couple of district nurse teams, perhaps, and ask them, screen your caseload, how many patients have you got with X, Y, Z, and try and find out how many patients they've got currently on their books, on their caseload. So then you can multiply that out within your trust as an average, just to get some idea of more accurate numbers, because that's what the study team needs as well. They need accurate, realistic numbers. I think it's quite a challenge to keep research visible for some reason. I ask all the student nurses that I come across, have you come across any research studies being done within the hospital setting? And not one of them yet has said to me, yes, I've come across it. So I'm not sure, it must kind of function under some radar somewhere. They don't seem to be aware of it. But there's actually a team of about 10 nurses in the hospital setting doing research studies. So I'm not quite sure how we can raise our visibility really. It's something we need to work on. And gatekeepers. So I've mentioned them already in terms of I go to the ward staff or I go to the district nurse teams. And I think one of the challenges with the district nurse teams is that they know their patients so very well often that what I found they were doing with the very best of intentions was they were screening out, I call it double screening, they were screening out their patients. So I maybe wouldn't even get to know about some potentially eligible patients because they were thinking, oh no, they've got this going on or they've got that going on. Or they might be, oh, they're too old, or they wouldn't tolerate that. So I think that what I try to get through to the district nurses is, I know you might be right, probably most of the time, in that you know your patients so well, but please just give the patient themselves the chance to say, yes, I know, because it's not you I'm asking to take part in the study, it's actually the patient themselves. So I think just being aware that they do that with the best of intentions just because they want to protect the patients. And we can sometimes, with our research studies, challenge current practice. In this current climate, there's such a fear, I think, of patients developing pressure ulcers that, say, with the Pressure 2 study, some staff might be a little bit reluctant to randomise patients who are at risk. So we can definitely find that is a challenge to try and get through to them what the study question is trying to answer and how we're doing it, and to minimise the risk to the patients but still work within the protocol. And results. well, getting them back to the patients in a timely manner, really, and the staff as well who have helped me. I find that quite difficult. It can take a long time from the end of a study to then get the results. And because of the patient population that I'm working with, they tend to be elderly. And I found that a lot of them, unfortunately, are no longer with us. So I can't actually give them the results anymore. And it just seems such a shame that, you know, they've put this effort and they've given me their time and energy to take part in this study. But then they don't get, it feels unfinished to me to not then give them the results. So that frustrates me a little bit. But I'm sure we'll get slicker as time goes on.
Sure will.
Yeah. Back to you. Thank you. I'll move my bits.
So, how do we make it happen? Well, I can say that I make it happen because I've got Louise. Okay, I am the PI, so I stand at the front here, in front of you all, saying that I'm the PI for this study, but this person over here makes it happen. Okay, so you need an excellent research nurse. So go and make friends. I keep saying this, I will say this again, make friends with your R&D department. Attend study meetings. You know, if there's a study going on, attend the study meetings. You'll get used to, like you're here today, some of you are involved with Pressure 2, you'll have been in the meetings that were held yesterday and today to find out more about it, to try and get to them as much as you can. The future, well, we need to have more research undertaken. It needs more research undertaken by nurses. I would like to bet if you went to your R&D department that most of the research that's undertaken is undertaken by the medical side of the trust rather than nurses. I'm the only nurse PI in our trust. And I go to these meetings and I sit with consultants and I'm much more involved in the research than they tend to be, it seems, or it feels like that. But I do feel very much in the minority. I'm much more confident now than when I first started. I remember going to the first few meetings and I would just sit there in the corner and say nothing. I didn't feel that nursing research was taken seriously, but I have to say that having been involved in so many studies now and having been published as much now, I am taken more seriously. I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying that it'll happen overnight, but just keep plugging at it. We need more nurses to be doing research. Closer to the patient, and research that is closer to the patient is important. Like I said, we're working towards 2 further commercial studies. Commercial studies can be a resource because the funding is much greater for those. Currently, for NHS research that are adopted by the portfolio, Louise's wages paid. We get some funding for my role as a PI, but it's quite minimal. Whereas if you do commercial studies, you actually get a lot more money. And what we've done with our research money is that we're reinvesting it in research nurses. So we're agreeing to take on some more commercial studies, but with the fund that we've accrued from the last commercial study, we can pay a research nurse to help Louise to take that on board. So we're reinvesting it. So my advice to you would be, if you're really passionate about research, like Louise and I are, is try and get some commercial studies, get the money, make sure that the money goes into your trust fund and that you reinvest it. I've been lucky enough to be able to do that. We've now got our pot that we can do that with. And opportunities to be involved in the development of the research questions. And I've lucky enough, because I've worked on the purpose programme for so long, that I'm now involved in that as Pressure 2. And that has really been really interesting to actually be moulding how things are developed. For those of you who are involved in Pressure 2, the questionnaire, I have to hold my hands up, we know that there is probably too many questions on there and it does need refined. But there are restrictions set around those things that you can't really do a lot about, unfortunately. And just to say that research isn't new, it's been around for a long time. And thank you for listening. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Whoever wants to first. I think you myself. And at my home, thank you for the microphone. I think it's interesting that you say that, because in my whole entire 3 years of training, I mean, I've been lucky enough to see one research study because I was an outpatient and they were doing a study about diabetes.
Yeah.
But a lot of students don't get to see it, and I think it's a missed opportunity because for me, I would like a little taster and go, oh, that's really interesting, and that could get me looking towards research. But because we might not have that opportunity, we might just write it off as being, oh, it's too complicated, the big words, and qualitative, etc. Please take the microphone away.
I quite agree with you. And I mean, Louise said that herself. Whether, maybe it's the next stage for us would be to say, we'll take students, to see what's involved. I mean, Louise is...
I have had students out with me for an afternoon. So when the district nurses have got patients involved in research studies, they will then say, oh, can you just take the student out with you for the afternoon to do your visits? So wherever I can facilitate that opportunity, I do, but it is just what I feel is on one person, just trying to spread the word wherever you can, really. I suppose it's got to start somewhere.
And I think, to be fair, I think the research you'll have seen in outpatients would be quite, what's the right words I should use? It's more quantitative, so it's more about lab results and things like that. Whereas, what we do, I guess, the pressure ulcer studies and things is more qualitative, which is very different. And, certainly I did a qualitative study for my master's, and if I had a choice again, I would do a quantitative one. But that's just my personal opinion, because trying to write up, patients' opinions and things is really difficult. But, I think nursing research is more qualitative. And, yes, you need... Have you got any... Is there an R&D department in the trust you work for?
I'm not entirely sure, but I would like to do, hopefully, maybe research.
Right. Good.
Watch this space.
Good.
Well, my question's very related to yours, because I'm a research active lecturer.
Oh, right.
And I'm sort of possibly becoming a bit of victim of my own success, because, thank you for your comment, because it's made me think, actually, I have a good relationship with the various research teams. Maybe they would take students, because it's not appropriate for a placement. It's too much work.
Yes.
And you wouldn't fulfill your outcomes. But actually, just having a morning or an afternoon, because I always say to students, the best way to learn about research is get involved.
Yeah.
Get involved and see what's happening. But what I was going to ask is, just more or less what you've said, is I have students coming to me saying, I'm getting interested in research. I'm interested in pursuing a career in research. How do I go about it? And I think my experience was a bit similar to you, but I sort of fell into it because
I've fallen
I think we're the
into it.
generation that fell into it.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, I give advice, but I'm just wondering, what would your be advice to someone like you to say, well, how do you go from where you are now to where you are now? Or you are now?
Well, certainly that's what's happened to Louise, so Louise can probably tell you better than I can.
I started this post really as a secondment, and I think that's probably the safest way to do it, because it's so different that you really need to test the water and try it first. Or it might be that you're working within a specialism and then suddenly a research study comes your way and then you end up involved that way. But you could certainly, I think, contacting the R&D department and asking for some time with the research nurses, perhaps on a subject matter that you're interested in. So it might be cardiology, it might be respiratory. Ask what studies they've got actively ongoing at the moment, and then ask if it's possible for you to come out for an afternoon. Or, if you're just doing short blasts like that, then you're going to get what you need really from it, because you're going to see it in action. And then if you want to pursue it further, you can always go back again and knock on the door again. Just keep pestering that way.
I think it is. I think I would encourage students to come spend a day in research, because I think, obviously this morning was talked about the guidelines and how the evidence we get for that, so it all fits with it. So to get some idea of what actually physically happens when you're actually physically doing research, I would encourage all students to spend some time with certainly the research nurse. The PI, the PI role can be as involved or as you want it to be, if I'm honest, I mean, I've said to Louise now, we're at the stage where I've said to Louise, you really should be you could be the PI, you know, but it has to be somebody who's clinically credible and lead of a service. That's what it appears. I don't agree with that, if I'm honest, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing without Louise's support. But research is very, very satisfying. It's very interesting. There needs, all I can say is there needs to be more nurse research. There isn't enough out there, and there needs to be more.
Do you think there'll be, as it goes on, there'll be more changes towards having nurse research or nurse-led research, whereas there used to be, you know, medical that'll start changing?
Yeah, I would like to think that. I really would like to think that. It is changing. It is changing. Yeah, yeah.
Because I think that's the way it's going to go.
Yeah.
Embrace from NIHI and things like that. So I think we're going to end up with more nurses doing research. But
Yeah.
I've got an interest in research, but my only problem is actually to break the barrier, as in like in terms of making sure that I don't end up doing all sorts of research, but one things that, you know, things that come up in clinical practice where you think like, but hang on, why can't we do that differently for that group of patients? So, you know, so it's just trying to actually make sure that it doesn't end up, I don't end up investigating almost quite a number of things.
Yes.
If that makes any sense.
Yes,
so
that you
I
do.
maintain that clinical aspect of.
Yeah. You have to focus.
It's not really a question, but it's just a comment. I think it's quite interesting and it's quite heartening to note that there are so many students with a passion for research. And I'd just like to emphasize the point that you made, that I think ultimately it's about having a passion for what you want to do. But also I think, particularly with wound healing, there's an issue about research and being credible as well.
Yeah.
And I know that traditionally in nursing, we haven't been good at having clinical academic careers. But I think that's something that will be changing, certainly in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And perhaps as the Tissue Viability Society, we could look perhaps at the next conference at doing something for students, specifically for an interest with research. And I'm sure that's something that we might be able to do. So watch this space, I think.
Yeah. I have to say, I mean, my interest, as I said in the slides, you know, and as you said before, I've fallen into it really. And I wish I was younger, because I think I would, you'll agree, well, you know what I'm going to say, because I would have gone on and I would be doing more and I would be developing my own research with the experience I've got now. But as I've got 24 months and I can retire, that won't be happening. But, you know, to me, Louise is the future, and encouraging. She is a great advocate for nurse research. An excellent advocate for nurse research, and her knowledge is excellent. But what I would say is really, really, really go and hound your R&D department and your trusts. You know, they are there to support research, and they will support nurses, but sometimes you have to knock on the door a bit harder as a nurse, but go and do it. Definitely do it.
I have another question. This is just a bit of an oddball question, and it's about the changeover. Do you think that now that nurses are having the degree education, that it's making them realize sort of about research a little bit more?
Yeah.
And it's kind of
Yeah.
us have the knowledge of.
Yes, I do hope so. Yes. Yes. Yes.
After 3 years,
Yes.
I'll know what it is.
Yes. Yes. And I think that will make a big difference.
I think they're less likely to run in the opposite direction from me. When I walk onto a ward, which I've had happen before, I think some nurses are a bit worried about the whole word research. See me coming in head for the hills. And I think that you're right, with the new programme, it should break down those barriers and maybe make people more open to it.
You know me, I can't not say anything. So, adding on from the student, I've been 27 years, I've been a registered nurse, and I've worked in several places up and down and in the middle of the country, and never once have I come across a piece of research that's being carried on around me. So I've never had the opportunity to be involved with it. And recently came across our R&D department in my last post and had interesting chats with them. And mainly my interest was, why aren't we getting involved with the Pressure 2 trial? Why don't you guys know about it? And they took me to a website that listed all the research. So it was basically, I had to go to them about it, which meant I had to have heard through word of mouth about it. And really, they've got access to all these trials, and what we need is for them to be coming to us. But I think we need to let them know we want them to screen that huge database of research for what's relevant to us as tissue viability nurses. So to get on to my question was, what would you suggest we do about that?
That's what Louise does.
I do screen that portfolio part. It's not always 100% accurate, I have to say, but it does give you a list of the studies that should be open to recruit and are also open to new centres. So I do trawl it. And the other nurses within the R&D team, certainly within my R&D team, they do trawl it as well every now and then. I think it is a two-way process. I think it's about the clinicians saying that they are happy to be involved. I think sometimes that there's a fear of the extra work that it's going to bring with it. So it's about the research department having the manpower there to work with the clinicians at the coalface, for me, and working as we do, hand in hand, really.
And it's a database we control too.
Yes, you can. Anybody can.
Yeah.
What's the website?
You can get it if you Google the NIHR CRN portfolio. If I just put in research portfolio, actually, if you Google that, you'll probably get it up as well. I can give you the website, actually.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that we had the first meeting of the Wounds Research Network yesterday. This is very inaugural, very early, but one of the things that's being discussed is putting together some sort of database for this sort of information, which it's going to be a major project, and keeping it up to date will be a challenge. But again, if there are members who are aware of things that can feed in, maybe this is the sort of thing maybe that would be helpful.
Well, maybe TBS could be like a little hub for that. So
Yeah.
come to that, link to that, and then anybody in tissue viability knows where to go. One-stop shop to look at the research.
I think it's historical, you know, I'm going to be controversial, but I think it's historical that in most trusts that the R&D department was set up for consultant-led research. And I think certainly that's how I feel, and I was intimating when I was the only, and I still am the only nurse PI in our trust, that it is very consultant-driven. That's how it feels. It isn't set up to encourage nurses or support nurses to take on research within the trusts. I think because I was in a community care trust initially when we first started doing this, it was a much smaller organisation, and we fumbled through, but we made it. I mean, you have to be committed to it. I've had many sleepless nights and many hours trawling over the computer thinking, is this how I fill this form in? But what is good with Pressure 2 and the things that have been happening over the last 2 days is you've had the opportunity to speak to people who have done it, and hopefully we can help each other to do it and try and, you know, raise the banner for nursing research, really, apart from anything else.